When I started photography, I was clueless, naive, and I had unrealistic expectations on how fast I would progress. I remember buying all the gear that I see photographers that I admire to use, and then, inspired by their travels, I traveled to the same countries, same locations, trying to capture images on the same level. I had a great camera, an expensive set of lenses, and a lot of intention to make it happen, to become this great travel photographer. I guess it wouldn't surprise you to hear that my results weren't exactly the same as my expectations. Actually, they were a disaster, not even close to the work I liked and wanted to capture. Then I thought, well, it can't be the photos. I have the same camera that these guys are using. They probably know Photoshop better. And I went on figuring out editing to make my images really shine. Can you see how naive and clueless I was? But our universe works in such a way that time and persistence have their tendency to put a lot of things in the right places. Life has its ways to humble you and teach you how things actually are. So my first epiphany was that there is nothing that can replace time, experience, and repetition. No matter which photography you're doing and which techniques you are learning, nothing beats direct experience or going out and repeating a process multiple times until you understand the ins and outs of it. Recently, I've heard a story that aligns very much with this wisdom. In the 1960s, there was a professor at the University of Florida by the name of Jerry Uelsmann. I hope I'm pronouncing the name right. He was teaching photography, and at the beginning of the semester, he decided to conduct a small experiment. He divided his film photography students into two groups, a quality group and a quantity group. The quality group was graded on the sheer number of photos they produced, while the quality group was graded on the excellence of a single photograph. At the end of the semester, Uelsmann, to his surprise, had found out that the quality group, despite their focus on perfection, produced far fewer good images than the quantity group. And you might be asking, but why? Their assignment was to create the perfect photograph. Why did they fail? Why did they underperform? Well, it seems that when the quality group spent their time theorizing about the perfect shot, the quantity group was actually out there shooting, experimenting with composition, lighting, and different techniques. And through trial and error, they refined their craft and gained that direct experience required to master a craft. Meanwhile, the quality group that was fixated on perfection had little to show for their efforts. Many of them have overanalyzed, hesitated, or just second-guessed their work. The final images were carefully planned, but lacked the depth and skill that come naturally to those who simply taken more photographs. As Uelsmann reviewed the results, he turned to his students with a big smile and said, "Mastery is not achieved by thinking about perfection. It is built through repetition, mistakes, and learning along the way." Uelsmann's experiment is not a surprise. It simply demonstrated that quantity often leads to quality. Through repeated action and experimentation, people are more likely to improve their skills and achieve better results than by focusing solely on perfection. And to simplify it even more, the moral story of it is simple. Watching YouTube videos about photography or having intellectual conversations with your friends about photography has its benefits. But being outside and experimenting will teach you more. Learning through direct experience is more memorable than learning from passive facts and will stay with you forever. Now, after understanding this core idea, I can tell you what I have learned through the time on the streets, going through the same process of refining my craft through direct experience and a lot of repetition. And of course, don't just listen to me. You must try it yourself and gain your direct experience. Otherwise, it will be just intellectualizing and will have no real benefits for you. When I started photography, for the first year, I didn't know anything about the concept of exposure. I would just set my camera in aperture priority mode, and however the camera exposed was received as granted. On the second year, when I started learning how to edit better, I started to make attempts to fix my exposure in Lightroom. And I know that many other photographers do exactly the same thing. We completely ignore exposure in the field and play with the sliders in attempt to fix it back home. That approach is fundamentally wrong. By fixing your exposure at home, you are not learning how to work with light properly. And that is a big problem if you want to get better in photography. Photographer who doesn't understand light, what kind of photographer is that? It is okay to fix minor mistakes that were done on the field, but the attempt should be to understand light and capture the light and the exposure properly on the field. One of the first things that I learned in my attempts to master the exposure triangle is that the goal is to hit correct exposure, dead in the center of your camera's meter. And that is another wrong approach. For some reason, exposure is often taught and understood in such a way that you always need to achieve correct exposure, but that's not how it works. My experience taught me that technical correct exposure thing is a principle. That bar that you see in your camera is not necessarily the exact way you need to work or you should expose. You don't need to have your exposure dead in the center because exposure isn't a particular settings. It's an intentional decision and a creative choice. Sometimes underexposing an image surfaces better in our storytelling. Sometimes overexposing gives the photo that exact look we were aiming for. Light doesn't care about how you meter, and you should only care about how you choose to work with it. Don't get fixated on the light meter. Just work the scene in a way you think you want to present it. And the decision how you should expose your scene is lying solely on you. Once you start feeling what light does to your scene and how your camera sees it, you will start photographing like an artist, not as a technician. This exposure thing is a whole topic, and it's a good place to send you to another video of mine that focuses particularly on that topic in a little bit of more depth. You will find it here in the top and in the suggested video in the video description. That leads me to my second realization, that light and color, apart from being compositional tools, are emotions. Every type of light carries certain mood. Harsh light, soft light, backlight. They're less about good or bad light. They're emotional tones that set the overall mood in your photograph. The same comes with color. Just like with light, we can use it to set the mood and inject a feeling into the photograph. We can use both of them to create harmony or contrast. Experienced photographers know that controlling light and color is about shaping emotion. And if I want to really simplify it, you use both light and color in a very similar way. First is to direct attention. We can use light in our image to pinpoint the viewer to look at that specific area in the frame, just like torch directing the viewer's attention to that particular spot. With color, we do it in a very similar way. We will use particular color that will stand out from the rest of the scene to direct the attention to that particular object. To make it work, the scene shouldn't have too many colors fight for your attention, but just few or be overall monochromatic. That will make that colorful area stand out properly. Similarly with light, we can't have too many sources of light. The other uses are to create contrast or harmony. The harder the light is, the more contrasty the image will be. The softer the light is, the more harmonious the image will be. It's very easy to remember. Hard equals contrast, soft is harmony. And with color, it's exactly the same. To analyze the colors, we usually use the famous color wheel. The closer the colors are on the color wheel, the more harmonious the image is. The further away they are from each other, the more contrasty the image becomes. You see? The tools are different, but the idea behind them is exactly the same. This is a very simple way to understand the roles of color and light in photography. I hope you remember it. The next realization is intentionality. That the camera doesn't care what is in front of you. It is there to help you capture it. It only cares how you translate it into visual story. We all know that two photographers can stand in the same place and create completely different realities. And that is because photography is not about what we see, it's about decisions. A decision about what should be in the image. An experienced photograph runs through a set of decision process. As more experienced the photograph is, the smoother and the faster that process runs. At the core of it is some of the following decisions are taken while looking at something. What is my main subject? How do I present it? What else is there? Is there anything that competes with my subject? Is there anything that distracts the attention from it? How is the background? How is the light? What are the colors presented in the scene? And then after running this algorithm quickly through his head, he readjusts the shooting angle and settings so the story is presented exactly the way he intended to. Here you will probably say, are you for real? Is that what you're doing every time when you're taking a shot? And my answer will be yes, that's what I'm doing. It's just that today it takes me a fraction of a second and I'm just not going by a list. I already don't ask the question, but as I look through the viewfinder, I can see right away what is off, and I will do an attempt to make it right. But that comes with a lot of repetition and intentional, thoughtful process. If you click your photographs randomly, you will not develop this algorithm with you. The magic in photography isn't what you see, it's what you want to emphasize. Deciding what to include, what to exclude, which moments to wait for. That's the place where your voice comes from. Lack of intentionality usually results in generally weak images. And one of the things that really pushed my photography are intentional constraints. Photographers usually think that creative freedom comes from having every lens and the best camera and basically all the options available so your creativity flows and can shine. But the truth is that abundance of gear creates the paradox of choice. When you have too much, you can't decide which one to use. And even worse, because you have too many lenses, you don't really know how each one of them looks and feels. That lack of mastery makes you produce random results and takes you far from creativity. I already have several videos in my channel that speak about long-term commitment to one camera and one lens for an extended period of time. I will put a few of them in the suggested videos in the description. But even without watching this, the idea is that constraints sharpen your vision. It teaches you how to take one tool that you have and make the best out of it. When you only have one lens or one focal length, you master it. You stop chasing the next possibility. You start seeing more potential photographic opportunities with the focal length that you have. And after some time, you begin to understand that creativity doesn't come from multitude of options. It comes from limitations and being pushed to solve problems with what you have. Without abundance of gear, your mind is free from this paradox of choice, and you can really focus on what is in front of you and how to make it better. Another thing that experienced photographers know is that a wide aperture is a composition killer. When you consistently use a telephoto lens at f1.2 or f1.8 and the background melts into this beautiful blur, you're creating a gorgeous aesthetic. But if that's your only way of shooting, you might be bypassing the challenge of composition. It's much easier to blur everything away than actually deal with the composition and the elements presented in the scene. It's not very rare to hear someone say, I paid for f1.2, so I'm going to shoot at f1.2. If that's your thinking, you risk becoming a slave of the gear and with ability to work with blurred backgrounds only. When it's not blurred, you feel that it's not pretty, and that is a problem. By always shooting wide open, you rob yourself of a vital part of photography, which is context. Context comes from the environment. If you exclude the environment, your photograph ends at the subject. The viewer knows what they're looking at, but not where they are, and that limits your storytelling abilities. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying you should never shoot wide open. What I'm saying is that f1.2 is a creative choice, not a default pro setting. Once you understand that, you can use aperture deliberately that matches your compositional vision. You can decide how to present what you see in front of you in the best way. I know that temptation of 3D pop and the blurred background is strong, but to truly grow, you need to engage with the whole frame, not just the main object. To learn more on this subject, I will add another video to the suggested video list. You might be tired of all these videos that I'm throwing at you, but this one is important. Its name is Composition Starts with F11, and perhaps by now you start to understand what I mean by that. Maybe here is a good place to mention that every photographic choice that you make shapes you as a photographer. The more experience you gain, the clearer your direction becomes. The moments that you choose shape your vision and your creative voice. Your favorite focal length translates into the way you compose. Your favorite lighting conditions, the way you process your images, your favorite places to photograph, and the subjects you choose to photograph, they all speak about you. Photography is equally about the world out there as it is about your world inside there. At the end, photograph is a self-portrait. If you look carefully, you will see the photographer in every photo he produces. You often think that you're photographing others, but in reality, you're always photographing yourself. So be mindful of that portrait that you're shaping. Happy shooting and see you next time.